On today's morning show from WRCO and WRCE, we're pleased to be talking about a special event coming up this very weekend. The Pine Valley Repeaters will be involved in that. We're going to talk today and educate you a little bit and educate myself on amateur radio. And here to join us, including Club President Mike Kaufman and Club Vice President Phil Wallace, Field Day Rep Jeff Williams is here today as well to kind of give you a little bit of an insight on what we're talking about. Phil, it seemed like we just did this. You guys had to get together last year, didn't you?
Though this is an annual event, so with the ARRL, they do this. What is it? The third or fourth weekend of every June, and it's amateur radio operators from all over the world get together, and we all try to make contacts with each other and various different forms of communications from AM, FM. PSK, there's all kinds of different modes that we use and whatnot to try to make contacts all over the United States and all over the world. So,
how long have you been a member?
I started with this club in 2008, so I've been here a little while.
Do you have a good number of people from Southwest Wisconsin in your group?
I don't know, Mike. How many people we have in the club now? About
I think about 25. I think there's about
Okay.
25 in the group right now.
Okay. It's one of those things that you do have to take tests and be licensed by the FCC. My call sign is KC9QQQ, which is pretty easy for most people to remember. Mike Kaufman, our president, he's W9.
WB9SLI. There you go.
Yeah. And then let me introduce Jeff Williams over here. He's kind of our engineer guru. He's very smart in a lot of the technical aspects of radio and radio workings. He just rebuilt one of our HF rigs that we use in our club once in a while too. But Jeff is N7TTQ.
Correct.
Jeff, how did you get interested in this particular medium?
This particular
In ham radio? Or
ham radio. Well, I was I graduated with a bachelor's in electronics engineering, and I was working in the field. And even well before then, I wanted to get my license, but I didn't have the time or effort or motivation to get my code. So I had to wait till literally the day that the code requirement was dropped, and it was dropped, I think, successfully based on the level of license you were getting. But anyways, I got my technician's license, which allows you to operate sort of handy talkie radios, FM, and then you move up, and there's a little slice of shortwave you can use, HF that we call it. And then from there, I kept doing that. And then I kind of got sidetracked by the internet because I could see a lot of things on the internet I was getting by ham radio. And then let it expire and lapse, and my grace period elapsed, and I started all over again in 2011. I had to go back and get my call sign as a vanity call sign. But, all this time I was working, doing tests and measurement for RF and microwave for companies in Portland, Oregon. You can tell I'm a transplant based on my accent, or lack thereof. And when I moved out here, I looked for the nearest ham radio club, these guys, and then I get sort of random parts to fix or configure or things like that. There are others that are not necessarily members of this club, although some are, that configure some of the more internet and digital things we're doing up on the what you call it, the East Side Tower.
Tower Hill.
But the activities here are to bring people into ham radio and get them to get their tests and start using it. We have a weekly net on Sunday nights at 8 p.m. so that people practice using their net control etiquette. We have a representative in the group at KC9CMD, Chris, who's also an Aries Races representative, and those are emergency organizations that ham radio operators can use to coordinate during times of emergency with weather and what have you.
So it goes back in time. I mean, it's something that I remember as a kid, and it goes way back to, I have a radio that from the 40s that picked up shortwave, maybe you could kind of talk about the differences and what shortwave is and things
Well, HF and shortwave are one and the same, frequency-wise. It covers from just above the AM band, I think 1.8 megahertz, maybe it's 2 megahertz, all the way up to 30 megahertz. Beyond that, and there's all sorts of stuff in there. There's shortwave broadcast stations, as you mentioned, and there's also amateur radio bands, some slices in there that are ironically harmonically related. 40 meters, 20 meters, 10 meters, then some oddball ones around. And there's also some utility stations. I used to do a lot of listening myself. There's some odd stuff out there, which is great. I caught a pirate station tuning in because I was a member of Mars Military Auxiliary Radio System when I first restarted in 2011, and one pops up. So you just spin the dial and you'll long distance aircraft when they're crossing the Pacific or Atlantic. They don't use it as much anymore because they're using satellite primarily, but it's still out there. Then above that is what they call VHF, which is sort of what you're accustomed to seeing with handy-talkie. There's a gap, and then there's UHF. So VHF is about 146 meg, UHF is 440 meg, so it's up even higher. And then there's all sorts of stuff about that. I do, and I have my own 900 megahertz. They call it it's a repeater node, and I'm the only one who uses it. So and there's stuff above that. So
Okay, good to learn that. And of course, Phil, you and I grew up in the '70s. CB was that was the big thing. Citizens Band.
Well, I want to reiterate this to a lot of listeners that ham radio, as the cultural term of amateur radio anyway, is far and above anything that CB radio. CB radio is kind of in my lingo, I call it the children's band because there's no license for it. You can buy a CB radio fairly inexpensive and just get on there and just start chatting and chawing with whoever. And it's unregulated and uncontrolled. Basically, there's 40 channels of pure nonsense. But I don't want people to refer to us as just an overgrown CB radio club, because we're much, much more than that. Like you've heard from Jeff over here, we're people who experiment in radio, we're engineers in radio, and different forms of communication. Now, Mike can tell you a little bit about our D-Star network that we're putting up around the state right now. I know your listeners can't see this, but I have a little handheld radio that is a D-Star digital radio, and there's different. Well, I'm going to go into some technical jargon that many might not understand, but there's different reflectors in the digital communication world. Now, each one of the digital repeaters is hooked to the internet, and they're all connected on the web. So if you're talking on this digital repeater up here on our Tower Hill up here, you're also connected to a horde of other repeaters that could be on that same reflector, so to speak. 19 Bravo is the one that most everybody in Wisconsin uses. Now, I have also heard truck drivers have gotten into amateur radio and D-Star radio. There's one driver I know that is in Wisconsin. He has a friend of his that is in South Carolina. And they talk via D-Star when he's in his truck going up the interstate in Wisconsin, and he's talking to a truck driver in South Carolina that's on Interstate 95 over 1,200, 1,500 miles away. Now, you can't do that with CB radio, I'm sorry.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
Who'd ever thought that you'd have that technology to be able to do that?
And this little radio right here actually has GPS built into it too. So, like, if I'm trying to see, like, where I am communicating with another operator, it'll actually bring up, if I key up on their radio, they will see the direction that I am from their radio and the actual distance within 1/10 of a mile. So I could be calling somebody and they reply, and on my radio it says so-and-so is 112.8 miles northeast of you, or for example, whatever. But yeah, D-Star, I'm just getting into it. Mike knows a lot more about digital D-Star radio than I do. And he's the one that kind of talked me into starting to get into it too now. So we have a VHF and a UHF digital repeater. Anybody that lives in Richland Center area, you see two great big huge towers up here on top of Tower Hill. One is the US Cellular Tower, and our radio group has the one that's right underneath it. It's a little 190 foot tower or whatever it was, but we had a lot of stuff going on that tower too. So
Yeah.
anyway.
Mike, why is amateur radio important to you? Why has it been through your years, your career and everything?
Well, I'm kind of a geek, and I've been a geek forever.
We all have.
So anyway, the club actually got started about 1975, and there was 5 of us. I was one of the original founding members. Richard Newman is the only other surviving member of the group here that started it. We had Cliff Wilson, Gus Slayback, and Carl Sievertson. We were the original people that started the club, and we built our first repeater from scratch, and we got it up on top of the hill, and it kind of went dormant for a little bit, and then all of a sudden we started having more ham radio operators in the community, and things started to perk up again. And you know, all of the things, all of the technology that we see in our cell phones, and that all has been started with ham radio. For example, I was making phone calls from my car in 1975, and how many years later before we finally started seeing cell phones. The internet came on out. Before that, we had packet radio where we hooked the computer up to a radio, and we were sending text and pictures and that back and forth. We had slow scan TV. We were sending pictures back and forth to each other over the radio way before that started happening on cell phones. So a lot of the technology that we have here today, you know, kind of started with ham radio. And we just keep going forward with experimenting, and I kind of find it interesting to go ahead and do that. And there's so many different facets to amateur radio. You know, some people like to do what we call rag chewing, and they just want to talk to people. And you know, I've been kind of a traveler in my life, and you know, if I'm going to go to a new country or so, I usually go on the ham radio and make a friend in that country, and then we had a case here where I made a friend in Iceland, and we went over to Iceland and visited them. And my wife is also a ham radio. In fact, she's one of the examiners that can give the exam, and so she's actually one class up above me. And she keeps prodding me. I hold a general class license, and she has an extra class license. I guess that's because she's a bigger geek or smarter than I am.
You married well, it sounds like.
I did very well, yeah. And she's also part of our ham radio club. So the club is doing well, and there's so many different reasons why people will go ahead and decide to get a ham radio license. Some people are survivalists. In other words, if our infrastructure goes down, what other way do you have to communicate but by ham radio? I talked to my wife from a remote mountainside in New Zealand to her in her office here in Richland Center via ham radio. Mm-hmm. And you couldn't do that via cell phone because there were no cell phone towers anywhere close to where we were in New Zealand. So it's a fascinating hobby. The other thing I guess that we'd mention is that also we like to serve the community in times of need, times of disaster, tornadoes, storm spotting, whatever seems to be the need in the community. The ham radio group is out there ready to go and provide communications. So anyway, I enjoy it. And we're looking forward to this field day that is coming up here. And Jeff was tasked with the project of going ahead and getting everything coordinated, getting it all set on up. And what we actually go ahead and do is we cannot use any commercial electricity or anything. Everything has to be done right there, so that in case of an emergency, this is what Field Day is all about. It's a contest, and it's a chance for ham radio operators to go ahead and set up their equipment and a remote place with no conveniences, and see how many people they can talk to.
Is this something, Jeff, that goes on all over the world then?
Well, I'm not sure about outside this country, but I'm pretty sure they do. ARRL is an American organization. However, the activities coincide with people all over the world. Now, they may be contacting you as an individual, but they certainly can. Or I don't know if there are organizations that are countrywide for each country that are also coordinating. That I don't know. But everybody knows we're having a field day on that 24-hour period, June 22nd, 23rd, and that's that. Hopefully that answers your question.
It does. So then it will be at the same spot as last year at the Richland Airport then?
Yeah, so it doesn't have to be.
Okay.
Field days can actually be done by people at their houses, even as a group, as long as they identify themselves. But Mike was generous enough to have helped coordinate getting us into a spot that's behind some of the hangars. That's a grass area, which is very convenient and stays out of the way of other activities to put stations. And we'll have 3 stations there, which allows people to do different things, or if somebody wants to do contesting and there's room for somebody who's doing something for the first time, we won't interfere.
So somebody can stop by, and as long as they're with one of you or somebody who has a license, they can do some work then?
Yeah, as in every case of a ham radio transmission, as long as there's a licensed operator sitting next to you, and you identify as being with that person, you're okay.
That'll be a good opportunity for people to do that and kind of check out the technology. And is there always something new coming up in this?
Well, there are so many fields, I call them fields of endeavor in ham radio, that you can literally pick and choose. Now within AHF, the trend obviously is for digital communications. Now it's being done on channels that used to be used for voice, but now have been designated for digital, which is just a slice of each of those bands I referred to, the 40, 20, 15, 10. So of those, the lower part's usually used for digital. It started out with CW, Morse code, and then they started doing more automated things. RTTY, which was an old teletype format that has been used on phone lines since the 40s or 30s or even before then. And that became standard. And then they moved on to some other, there are dozens of modes, we call them, of how to get the digital signal into an audio form that is transmitted out your transmitter and received the same way. Right now, the one that is sort of the most popular is called FT8, which is a sort of a low signal, high distance, which is great, digital mode that we will have one station dedicated for, which is great. KC9LBO, Ralph Hendrickson will be running that station. And there are subsets. There's Whisper, there's JT8, WSJT8. There's all these. Most of the new ones were invented by a guy, Stan Taylor, I don't remember that. Joe Taylor. Finally got his name. And he's sort of refined these slow speed and high propagation distance modes. And so those are the latest trends, but there's many others. You just pick one and you'll have people who are fans of it. So
what he's referring to in, like, say, the FT8 mode or whatever, it's a very low wattage transmit and receive, somewhere in the half watt up to maybe 5 watts. There's one friend of mine that is in Mazamani that built a small little radio out of a little secrets box. You know, the little metal secrets box?
Sure.
Yeah. He built a little radio out of a secrets box that had a little antenna on it, and he was talking on a 1/2 watt, and he was doing HF propagation, you know, talking to people hundreds of miles away, you know, with a little hand-built thing, you know, that, I mean, he was doing it more in Morse code. I mean, he wasn't actually doing voice communications, but, you know, he's still communicating in one form or another.
And I think I guess I always think of your club, Phil, when there's bad weather, because you have weather spotters out there and about there.
Yes, that's one of the primary reasons why I got into this back in 2008 is I wanted to be able to serve my community in one form or another. And weather's kind of always been a very interesting topic for me anyways. So watching the clouds and watching them roll in and being able to report back to, with our radios that we're set up with on our 146.91 megahertz, our primary repeater for our club, that repeater will also be, can be heard by the La Crosse weather station up there in La Crosse, up on the bluff. And they communicate directly with us through our repeater, you know, and so if we see something on the ground down here, then we can call up to them and say, hey, you know, this is what I'm seeing, and they can issue an alert. They'll call, you know, and put the alert out to like your radio station that you can forewarn, you know, people in the community, hey, we got such and such is coming our way, or we got a tornado warning or whatever, and this is where it's located. Well, guys like me that are the eyes and ears on the ground for the weather service, I mean, they're watching their radar. They're looking at weather measurements, barometers, temperatures, humidities, and all that kind of stuff. But we're the eyes and ears on the ground, actually seeing stuff. And with our new radios and the D-Star capabilities, we could send a picture right directly to them on the radio and say, here's what we're seeing in the sky, and then they can see it and evaluate more. And
they decipher it then when they see the picture.
Yeah, they're the final ones that determine whether the warnings get issued and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, like I said, we're the eyes and ears on the ground. Now, weather spotters are different than weather chasers or storm chasers. So storm chasers are, you know, to me, that's more like a thrill seeker. You know, somebody who wants to go ride the roller coaster. Okay, you know, that's fine. You know, you go do that if you want to. I'm gonna watch from a safer distance, and I'm gonna observe the clouds from like maybe 4 or 5 miles away, and say, hey, oh look, this is what I'm seeing. You know, I'm not. I did have one small little tornado here a few years ago, that the one that took out the front of the O'Brien Brothers building, and the one that took the roof off of the mobile oil change. I was actually following and chasing that one. I went right up over the top of my truck.
I remember that, yeah. And going back to the tornado in Viola, I remember you guys were really instrumental in keeping people safe at that time, too.
That one was a little bit before my time, I think. I wasn't quite into the group, but that was one of the events that primarily inspired me to become someone that I can go and I can either spot and help, and you know, if I can even save one life, I'm super happy about it. I think, I'm not sure who all was in the group, and we had the flood. Glenn was in the group. You know, Glenn's back over here too. But we were instrumental in helping out with radio communications in Viola when they had a flood up there. What was that, 2007, 2008, something like that, or whatever it was. And a lot of the communications were underwater and underground, so phone lines were down, primary communication lines were down. You couldn't get word in and out of there. Another example, a prime example, the one that I like to use is, how about that big F8, or not F8, I'm sorry, F5 tornado that came through Joplin, Missouri a few years back. I mean, just totally wiped out the whole town. No cell towers, no cell communications, no phone lines, no nothing. I mean, the only people that were talking in and out of there were people on ham radio. And I, as an HF operator in my radio room at home, was actually doing radio relays, you know, somebody would call out of Joplin, Missouri, say, hey, we got so-and-so wants to get word to somebody in Wisconsin, okay? So a Wisconsin operator like myself would take the message and then make a phone call, say, hey, I just got a radio communications from so-and-so, one of your relatives in Joplin, Missouri. Just wanted to let you know they're okay. And so that was the way to get word out where no other form of communication was available. And that's one of the things that ham radio or amateur radio is very well known for.
You as a pilot, Mike, you've kind of used it during your business too, haven't you?
Well, you can't actually use amateur radio for any kind of business purposes, but you can use it for public safety. And for example, when there was some of the flooding, I was up in the airplane with the ham radio, and I was talking to people on the ground and giving them some directions as to what is happening and what I'm seeing from up in the air and that. So we do have a ham radio in the airplane as well, and I can talk to my wife from any place in the world with that ham radio. Another thing that our club has been instrumental in doing, and we've had very, very good support from the National Weather Service, as Phil was going ahead and saying, and every year the National Weather Service has a Storm Spotter Appreciation Day, and I usually go to that. And some years back, when I was down there, they made the comment that Richland Center did not have a weather cam or weather camera. And so our group was very instrumental in putting up on top of the hill a weather camera. And I want to thank all of the community organizations that have helped us and made donations and that. So we have a weather camera up on top of the hill that is literally phenomenal, and so we can go ahead and monitor the city for storms that are approaching, storms in the distance, things that we may not have a spotter in a position to see. So it's located up on top of the tower, and Richland Electric Co-op has been very instrumental in working with us on the camera. And we have a second camera that will be deployed sometime in the near future on another one of Richland Electric Co-op's towers. And just so many of the community organizations have helped us with funding for different projects that we've worked on.
How does that camera work then? Do all the members have access to that video?
It's on a very, very private network and very secure network, and you need to have a little special box. As a member of the club, these little boxes are specially programmed, and so you go ahead and you hook that little box to your computer, and you can bring up the camera. The camera has a tilt and zoom and pan, so you can look at all around the community. And it is absolutely amazing, and the quality of the camera for night operations, it's amazing to see what has been developed. And of course that's a commercial unit that was purchased, but really works well. So, we're doing everything we can, to support our community, because our community supports us.
We'll be back with more about the upcoming field day this weekend. The Pine Valley Repeaters are here. Phil Wallace, Jeff Williams, and Mike Kaufman, and we'll have more in a moment. They're in the studio with us. They're a bunch of hands, I can tell you that. There you go. Welcome back to the morning show at WRCO Radio, and something's going wrong here. Computer issues.
The blooper issue.
That's live radio.
Welcome back to our morning show on WRCO Radio. So
There we go.
glitches there, man.
That's the WRCO bloopers edition.
Garbage in, garbage in, garbage out. Everything stopped there for a second. We are glad to be back with you to talk about the upcoming field day for Pine Valley Repeaters. Jeff Williams, Mike Kaufman, Phil Wallace in the studio with us. And I wanted to talk a little bit about, Jeff, you talked about getting a license. Now, I remember back in the day when I finished broadcast school, that was the big thing. I had to get a license just to be on the air. You know, all of us had to. That's no longer true for those that are in radio. We don't have to do that anymore.
Well, right, in amateur radio you do.
But you do. So I'm curious, how difficult is it for someone to apply for a license?
Well, I mean, the physical application's filling something out, but the study
Right.
and, preparation, for the lowest level, which is called the technician's license, is fairly simple. I think there's a pool of questions available on the internet, from which they draw all questions that are given to you when you get an examiner, such as Mike's wife, Linda Kaufman, KC9HHF, to when she gives you the exam on a sheet of paper. So, I would give. It's hard for me to tell you because I'm a double E with RF experience, covering 35 years, but you could literally spend maybe 40 hours and you'd be very prepared.
So a lot of the questions that are in the pool, some of them are regarding basic electronics, and here is the battery. This is the plus side, and this is the negative side. And DC current is direct current, and it goes from positive to negative, okay, in a circuit. And alternating current, of course, it goes back and forth. And these are some of the basic questions that the SEC wants you to kind of have a basic working knowledge of electricity and electric components and how they work. And that helps you get into experimenting with your radio and, okay, well, how do I tweak this and make this better? And what is a diode? How do you explain to everybody out there what a diode is? We see LED headlights on your cars. You know what that is? A light emitting diode. A diode is something that electricity only passes one way, and it doesn't revert back the other way. And there's more to it, and I won't go into a whole lot of the technical aspect, but you're learning all this as you go. And like Jeff says, the technician's license is fairly easy and it's fairly simple, and it also covers a lot of basic knowledge that you would need to operate. And then general will go into more of like antenna configurations and a little bit more knowledge. And then the extra, which I haven't taken yet, and of course Mike, he hasn't taken it yet either. So I'm thinking Linda's probably chomping at the bit wanting us to get some extra licenses there. And extras go a lot more complicated and complex. General will talk about radio wave propagation. And what that means is how radio waves will bounce off of what layers in the atmosphere and what distances you can talk on and stuff like that. That was one of the things that interested me too. Back in my CB radio days and the truck diving days, you could talk skip is what we used to call it.
Sure.
And basically all that is the radio waves are skipping off of certain layers in the atmosphere, depending on how charged they are right now. And I will tell you honestly, this field day right here, we have a lot of charged particles in the atmosphere, and there's going to be a lot of great propagation from what I've seen on some of the studies. So we should be able to do some good distance communications on this field day from Saturday and Sunday. So.
Does weather have a factor? Because I know it does with our FM signal, especially if it's foggy and humid and things like that. Is it the same, Mike?
Oh yes, yeah. A lot of times we talk about band openings on some of the VHF frequencies, and it's amazing, flying in an airplane, and I'm flying in Wisconsin, and every once in a while I might hear Orlando control tower talking to an airplane, and these are due to band openings. And of course the amateur band is next door neighbor actually to the aircraft band, and it's very interesting. And when there's a band opening, people are just get all excited, and regardless what they're doing, if they're at their job or whatever, they like to drop what they're doing and go in ahead and see it. who can I talk to here with this band opening, and it's interesting. And of course, the HF bands, they're long range bands, and different times of the day, different bands are better than other bands, and that sort of thing. And so there are just so many facets and interesting things about the amateur radio. And I became an apartment dweller here, and I used to have a huge tower behind my house, and people that played golf always remembered I was living right on the golf course there, and I had this big antenna up with these big beams on it, and we'd turn those on around, and we'd point them at somebody, and we'd be able to talk to them. So I kind of miss that a little bit, and so anyway, we have HF in our mobile, and so we can not do as good as we did when we had the big tower, but at least we can stay on the band.
Speaking of band openings, I mean, I was sitting on my HF rig at my house one time, and I was talking to a guy in Brownsville, Texas, way down there on the southern tip of Texas, and he was just, driving back to home from work, and he's just on his radio in his little truck or whatever it was that he was driving. And then talking to him as clean and as clear as you and I are sitting right here. And then 10 minutes later, you can't get him at all.
It's gone.
So it's gone. It just depends on what clouds are moving over and where what particles are charged in the atmosphere. So,
what about overseas? Have you had some contacts over there?
I have. I talked to a guy in Ireland one night, just on my little 100-watt radio right from the upstairs bedroom. And it just happened that radio propagation was just perfect, and we talked for about 4.5 minutes, and exchanged call signs, and like I said, 5 minutes later, it was gone, and there was nothing. So, and I've talked to people in Canada, I've talked to people in the southern United States. Florida is a big one that you can get usually at about anywhere between our time, 11 p.m. and 1 a.m., 2 a.m. or whatever. I mean, between midnight and 3 a.m., you'll hear a lot of what Mike called rag chewing. These good old boys will talking from one end of Texas to the other end of California, and they'll be sitting there talking and BSing all night long. So, so yeah.
Lots of chances. Have you had experiences of that, Jeff? Talking?
Yeah, I certainly have. My most, I guess, remarkable ones were mobile, using a mobile HF antenna, where you use a coil to tune the frequency that you're trying to transmit and receive on. And it was in an old Ford Taurus, and I was able to pick up Romania, Italy, Germany, and Russia.
That's great.
And I remember some of them by incident where I was driving physically. It took several tries. You have to be patient. Not really one of my virtues, but when you're really focused, it will be. And the Romania one, I was driving down I-84 just before I hit the Blue Mountains in Oregon, and he was there, and I couldn't tell his call sign. It took 100 tries. Finally, I figured it out. And I tried probably 30 or 40 times. Then he got back to me, and that was quite the catch. And that's done with a little whip antenna on the back trunk of the car with a 100-watt radio that's just sitting in the car. So, you can go, and people have gone much further. But you can use a mobile setup to go vast distances.
We have a big antenna set up at the field day on Saturday.
We'll have, I'm actually going to use a similar mobile antenna. It's called a screwdriver antenna, where you modify the inductance, and that's going to be mounted on the side of the trailer. I'm bringing my own independent setup, which will be some distance away, and there I'm going to use a wire antenna that's a dipole, so you feed in the middle, and then the leads go out in either direction. Ralph Hendrickson, KC9LBO with the FT8 setup, the digital setup we refer to, will be using, I'm not sure what antenna, but because it's low power and more sensitive, it'll be something that's not large. I'm not sure exactly what he's using. But each station, there will be 3, will have their own completely independent power supplies, antennas, and radios.
Fascinating stuff. Bill, why is a field day important, do you think?
One of the things that I think is important is because it allows people that might be interested, or I think, was it a year or so ago, we had a Cub Scout, Boy Scout group from the Spring Green area actually came out, and they were able to operate a little radio and kind of tinker with things a little bit, and those young boys and girls were able to see what radio communications looks like, you know, from that aspect. So they can earn radio merit badges and stuff if they do certain things. I think it's important because we all know we're all carrying around a cell phone right now. I mean, that's in today's world, that's part of your body now. You know, I mean, you don't see anybody without one most of the time. But this is nothing more than a digital radio. There's one lead antenna run down one side of it, and that's your receive antenna, and the other antenna runs up the other side of the cell phone, and that's your transmit antenna, and it'll transmit on 1200 megahertz bands and receives on 800 megahertz bands. And so that's your two-way communications device, and all of that technology that is in your cell phone all came from radio experimentation and pioneers in radio communications from like amateur operators like ourselves. And so if you want to learn how to communicate better, you know, not necessarily with a cell phone, but, you know, amateur radio is the way to go, I think.
It's important to bring those youngsters in there, Mike. Is it like other hobbies? Is it kind of an aging population, or are you seeing some young people get interested?
Well, we're seeing some young people there. I think we're getting a lot of geeks out there, like myself, and I don't mind being called a geek. And I like to experiment. And you know, as I mentioned, so many facets of amateur radio. The amateur community has their own satellites for communications that are up there that are orbiting, and we can take our handheld with a proper antenna, and if we know where the satellite is at a particular time, and there's tracking programs that you get, and you just point your little antenna up at the satellite, and wow, can you communicate all over the world, and digital formats and public safety support there. Again, the facets are just amazing. And then there's the people, and there's like about 100 amateur radio operators in the county here. A lot of them we don't even know. And I think a lot of them, as I had mentioned earlier, maybe they're survivalists, and you know, they come to the realization that there's going to be the day that cell phone isn't going to work, like Phil was talking. Mm-hmm. And how are you going to communicate if you don't have a cell phone? Well, we got a ham radio, and let's go ahead and get that ham radio out. And we'd like to invite all of the other amateur radio operators in the county to come and visit us at Field Day, and maybe get involved in the club if that's their thought. So again, it's open to the public. Come find out what we're all about. And Jeff has put forth a lot of work there in getting all of the stuff hooked on up, so that when we go ahead and we talk to a particular station, if we got three operations going on there, that we're all not talking to the same person and logging them twice or 3 times or 4 times. So we have a logging program, and it's going to be very interesting. We've been doing the field day for many years in different locations, and we're looking forward to this one.
So it's at the Richland Airport, and will somebody be there all 24 hours, Phil?
Well, that's going to be weather permitting.
Okay.
So now, weather permitting on Saturday, we're also going to have guys like me that are going to be weather spotters that are going to be out there, you know, making sure that everything is good and safe and whatnot. If we have a little drizzly here and there and whatnot, not a big deal. Okay. But if there's lightning more than 20 miles or closer from us, it'll be shut down for safety reasons, obviously. But other than that, I don't know if anybody's going to be there overnight on Saturday night. I'm not sure how many of us are gonna be there on Sunday morning yet, but, it's primarily, if you wanna participate, 1 o'clock from Saturday afternoon up through maybe, 8, 9 o'clock Saturday night, weather permitting, like I said, so, yeah.
Sounds like lots of fun. You know what I was thinking too is the movie Contact. Everybody seen that one before? Have you seen that
Many
one?
times.
Well, yeah, I was going to say.
Many times, yeah.
Yeah. But I wonder if that brought back maybe some people, or brought some people.
There's something that I've been trying to do for a long, long time, and I keep tracking the ISS, that's the International Space Station. And the International Space Station does have a ham radio operator system on board up there, and as it flies over, of course, there's dozens and dozens of ham operators trying to make contact with it as it flies over. So I haven't yet been able to actually accomplish that, but as a Star Trek nut myself, I have always thought, it's like, man, I really want to talk to an astronaut.
That'd be really cool. Jeff, anything you'd like to add today as we close?
Oh, well, just along those lines, a few things. First of all, we got a little blurb in last Thursday's Richland County Observer. I asked him to do it again this week, but I didn't get a confirmation whether or not he did. If you go to the ARRL.org website and follow the links down to the field day, they show maps of various participant groups, and we have a pin drop at the airport that is something that you use in like Google Maps. So that was done. I brought some informational sheets that can be handed out, and we'll have contact information for anyone who wants to pursue this further, who is not already in the club. And we're trying to get some banners to show directions, but it's not hard to get there. And I have contacted the space station. In fact, I did a packet contact to the Mir space station when it was in orbit years and years ago, and plenty of satellite contact with a handheld with the antenna, as Mike referred. And that is a level of excitement you will rarely have in your life to make that first contact. And 1,200 miles away with 5 watts, but you're going up in the air to the satellite and then being repeated down. It's like our repeater, except for it's sitting 150 to 250 miles overhead. So in any case, so we'll have we have if you go to the website for the ARRL, and you can also go to our own website, w9pvr.org.
Yeah.
And we have plenty of information there too, so there's no shortage of ways to contact us.
Good job, guys, and we appreciate it. We hope people will stop out and see you on Saturday.
All right, thanks, Phil.
You
Thank
got
you
it.
very
Thanks
much.
for having us on the show.
Great to have you in here today. Fascinating stuff. Jeff Williams, Field Day Rep, and Phil Wallace, Club Vice President, Mike Kaufman, Club President of Pine Valley Repeaters, and step out and see them on Saturday and find out more.
Thank you.